In 1961, an Australian mother travelled 15,000 kilometres to a war-torn country to be reunited with her soldier son. This is the story of my grandmother, Thelma Healy. Thelma kept a record of her harrowing journey from Brisbane, Australia to Pusan in South Korea in a travel diary. This is Thelma Healy's passage to Pusan, and I will be following in her remarkable footsteps. So my grandmother, it took her 12 days to get to Seoul. She came by boat and then by train and then by plane. For me, just 10 hours, so I can't really complain. So it was a very fast and easy journey by comparison with my grandmother. And yeah, probably like Grandma Thelma. I'm really happy to be here. On this trip, I will be taking the same path that Thelma travelled. These first moments are filled with anticipation. This family story begins with my Uncle Vincent, a kind, brave man who I never met, but who I've come to know well. He was an Australian soldier who fought in the Korean War. Vince was everything to Thelma. He was her first child, number one son, and they had a special bond. Almost indescribable bond. They understood each other. June 25, 1950, North Korea invaded the South. 21 nations gathered under the United Nations flag, and Australia was one of the first to have boots on the ground to fight for democracy and freedom in the South. Gapyeong, in South Korea, is where Australian troops fought one of their fiercest battles. Each year, the Korean government invites veterans who fought in the Battle of Gapyeong and their families to a ceremony to thank them for their service and sacrifice. The Battle of Gapyeong is an important reminder of Australia's critical role in the Korean War.
목동에 그 전투 기념비, 호주 참전 기념비 오신 것을 환영을 드리고요. 한번 전적기에 대해서 설명을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 호주 전투 기념비는 1983년 12월 27일 한국전 참전협회와 가평군 군민이 모아서 만든 비가 되겠습니다.
It's lovely. It's lovely. Really nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
이 동파는 그 호주 군이 한국 전쟁 당시 우리 지역에서 전투한 상황인데요. 1951년 4월 22일서부터 4월 24일까지 3일간 치열한 전투가 있었습니다. 그 전투는 호주 3대대가 참여를 했는데 호주군의 인명 피해는 사망자가 32명, 부상자가 59명이 발생을 하였고 중공군 1만 명을 격퇴한 지역이기도 합니다.
Okay. Many young Australian soldiers fell in battle on this foreign soil. Through the oral history of his surviving siblings, I've come to know Vince as a brave, strong, loving hero. A hero to his family, a hero to his country. So this is the old house.
Lou, it is. It's very lovely. It's been well kept. Well, it's quite different. It's been changed a wee bit, but the house is great.
And that's the front room.
That's the front room, Lou, where we were all born, 9 of us. Big room. And babies, of course, were all born at home in those days.
Vince being the first one.
Yes, Vince was the first and the bonniest of all, I guess. He was a blonde-headed boy and very special.
So tell me, how did your mother, Thelma, and your father, Mick, how did they come to marry?
Mum being Church of England and Dad being Catholic, they married, but it was even worse still. Mum became pregnant before she was married, which was scandalous, disgrace, bringing shame on the family. But anyhow, Mum married, then there were 9 pregnancies, in pretty quick succession, and Mum eventually was she was, wiped from the family to start with, but
From
then,
her family?
yeah, from her family, because it was such a disgrace from from people that lived were very highly thought of. I mean, as I said, A, to marry a Catholic when you're Protestant, and B, to be pregnant. It was a double scandal. But anyhow, Mum lived through it. She married. Vince was the reason she got married. And this is why he's so special and so precious to everybody,
Unfortunately, Mick was an absent father. He was a gambler, and unfortunately he was abusive. And Thelma virtually had to bring up 10 children on her own. So Thelma really had to live on her wits. What was it like growing up by the beach?
Louise, the beach was very much part of our life. We lived walking distance, which was 2 minutes. Mum lived in Sandgate, grew up in Sandgate. We were all born in Sandgate. Vince was the eldest, and he was the eldest of 10 children, but 9 were born in Sandgate. And we could come down here safely. Vince would bring us down. He was in charge of us, and he was, the big brother that looked after us. And it was a safe place to be. And that was his role from day one until the day he died. He still kept looking after us, and Mum and the whole lot. So, this is Sandgate. And it's very meaningful, still is.
Mum, this is where you went to school.
Yes, Lou, Sacred Heart Parish School. It was a lovely school. The whole lot of us went. We walked from 3rd Avenue to here. There was Vince and Kathleen, Paddy, Jimmy, Geraldine, Mari, John and the others. So it was all good fun. They were happy days, Lou. Happy days. When Vince was preparing for his first Holy Communion, the nuns always told him, and would have told us all, that if you died after you had received Holy Communion, you would go straight to heaven and you'd be an angel. So anyhow, Vince thought, well, that sounds a pretty good idea. He'd be an angel at 7 or 8 years old. What a way to go. So what did he do? He lay on the road, hoping that a car would run up. Fortunately, somebody discovered him and took him home to Mum, who was absolutely devastated, as you would be. Anyhow, she said to Vince, she said, I don't want you to be an angel. I want you to look after me. And there and then he promised at the age of 7 or 8 that he would look after Mum.
They grew up during the Depression, during World War II. Now, these were very troubled times in Australia. War was ever present. The Japanese were virtually on Australia's doorstep. So he joined the army because the army was very much the military was very much part of their life. But also, more importantly, his wages helped support the rest of the family. Japan, as we know, lost the war, and there were terms of the surrender that they had to adhere to. So it was Vince's job, together with those of his fellow soldiers, was to enforce the surrender, to make sure that Japan was abiding by the terms of the agreement.
I was in the same company as Vince. We were both in headquarters company, and we were in the signal platoon, and Vince was in the machine gun platoon. He was always a very upstanding and handsome man, I suppose, even from male. If I remember correctly, he had fairish hair. He possibly may have been around 6 foot, and he was a very distinguished, even from a male point of view. He stood out amongst the men.
Before I joined the army, I was doing athletics in Sydney. And of course, automatically when we joined the army and went to Japan, they started forming all these sporting groups. Quite good friends. As I said before, Vince was a good bloke and a good athlete. You know, I admired him, you know.
Lou, I've got some lovely, lovely presents I want to show you. They are very treasured presents that I've had from Vince, and I'd love you to see them.
Wow!
So,
where did these come from?
Vince sent, as you know, Lou, Vince sent presents to all of us. These came many years ago. I would say one was Christmas, one was birthday. I had a look at them, thought they were beautiful, too nice to wear, and so I've kept them. And
What is it?
this is a beautiful pyjama set.
Lovely.
Gorgeous, beautiful colours.
Your colour?
I know, it is.
Wow, what did you think when that arrived?
I was really gobsmacked. I was blown away, Lou, because it was just something beautiful. They probably wouldn't. I need to have more elastic in those because they would have fitted me years ago.
Yeah,
but it is lovely, isn't it?
And the dressing gown
as well.
So beautiful. So these are presents that he bought, parcelled up, sent all the way home.
Yes, yeah, he did. And not only to me, I mean, everybody got presents. But
What a great brother.
I know, he was very kind and very generous, very kind and very generous, and used to send, you know, money home and all that. And as well as all the lovely presents, he was a great letter writer.
Yes.
Yeah, and it was great excitement, you know, when we'd get home from school of an afternoon and Mum had these letters. So that was really great, and I've got one here that I can read that he writes to all the kids, you know, he includes everybody in it. And we'd sit around
Look at the old paper. It's barely holding together.
yeah. Well, look, it's old, isn't it? Well, it was written in 1945. So that's
what does Vince say?
Well, he says, "Well, kids, how are you all getting along up there at number 27? Well, pretty well, I guess. How is Miss Mari now that she's had her tonsils out? I suppose young Carmel is well again now. Good on you, John, old boy, for doing so well in your exams. Well, Peter, you terror, I may be seeing you before long, and on our way to Conungra, we may have a day in Brisbane."
Wow.
So that's just one of the many letters that, you know, he used to send, and it was always great excitement. But, you know, you'd come home from school and any letters from Vince, Mum, and we'd all sit round the kitchen table, and it was lovely, really lovely. So yeah, he was a great brother, and these are lovely things to sort of look back on. And my prezzies I'll keep forever and treasure, and now that Vince is not here. So we miss him, and he was lovely. Then I'll start to cry. He still makes me cry, but he was, you know, he was a very lovely brother. And, you know, a son, he looked after Mum, he was very kind, he was very generous, but generous to everybody. So we were very lucky to have somebody as lovely as Vince. God, I'd cry all the time.
So this is the Sandgate War Memorial.
Yeah,
This would have been here when you were kids?
it was.
Yeah,
Yes, it
'cause,
certainly was.
Built in 1924.
Yeah. And we, well, you know, Vince was here in 26, born 26, I was 33, so it was definitely here. Died and yet in memory shall know him.
It's a nice memorial, isn't it? I like the insignia. They died and yet in memory shall they live.
That we may know the worth of
their
sacrifice. Know that their death in freedom's cause stands as a beacon light to point the way, the path to peace. And that's what it's all about.
Vince would like that.
Vince joined the army. He went to Japan after Japan had lost the war, and he went with the BCOF, the occupation forces, to enforce the surrender and restore peace to Japan.
Yes.
While he was in Japan, the Korean War broke out, and he volunteered to go. He didn't have to go, but Vince, being the person he was and the caliber of him, he wanted to go because he believed in freedom and democracy. But from going to Japan to Korea, it was a very, very different situation. Japan was a peacekeeping, Korea was a full-on battle, which was totally, totally different.
When the Korean War broke out in 1950, Vince, along with his fellow Australian soldiers, answered the call of the bugle. Before leaving for Korea, Vince said a sad farewell to his mother Thelma and his 9 other siblings, including his baby sister Monica. The Korean War not only cast a deadly and destructive shadow on Korea, but on my family as well.
Australia came to be involved in the Korean War because we were very concerned about security in the Pacific area as a whole after the shaking up we received during the Second World War. Australia's desire to make the United Nations successful as a force for keeping peace in the world, and of course we did not want to see South Korea conquered by the North.
The war had actually come down from North Korea right down through South Korea, more or less to a place called Taegu, and it just showed that the number of people who were suffering, that all those houses all the way through were going, and the poor old Korean people was in a bad way. And the Korean women, they were always crying, and the Korean men, they didn't know what to do. The Korean people was always moving south, always moving, and that was the only way they kept alive, was to keep moving. And it was a terrible thing, really, terrible war. Yeah. Unfortunately, the army, they told us to leave our winter uniform back in our trunks in Japan. So we left them all there, so it meant that we had no winter uniform. But we were dressed in our summer uniform. And the cold really did us. The cold would come up from under the ground. And when you slept overnight, the cold woke you up. And it was extremely cold, very cold.
The many letters and photographs Vince used to send home slowed to a trickle when he was posted to Korea. He was a frontline soldier fighting a mad, mobile war, and he had his hands full. But the bigger enemy was the cold. Young Australian men who were used to 30-degree heat were suddenly dealing with minus 30-degree cold, and they were ill-prepared and ill-equipped to handle the freezing conditions. It was hard enough to survive, let alone fight a war in the numbing cold. Even eating and sleeping were a struggle. To keep his morale up, Vince took comfort in photographs of his family back home and memories of the warm Brisbane sunshine.
The first time when he was only injured, he had some shrapnel in his eye. He was caught up in a battle at the apple orchard, and we thought, okay, this is it, Vince will be home.
The UN forces recaptured Seoul and continued pushing north. But the arrival of the Chinese People's Volunteer Army, joining forces with the North, tipped the scales once more, and the battle grew more desperate. And then on March 7, 1951, a dreadful day dawned. It was bright and beautiful the day I went to Maewa Mountain for the first time.
Must be the next one. So 2, 2, 8.
En route, I met a Korean War veteran who fought for South Korea in the Battle of Maewha Mountain. He still remembers that day very clearly. He joined the army, he finished his schooling, and at the age of 18 he joined the army. So I'm interested to talk to you. I believe that you fought in the Battle of Maewha-san.
Yes, I did.
보선제 전투했는데 그 산 꼭대기에는 유엔군이 있었고 우리는 그 전방 능선으로 나가지고 몰리 나가서 있고.
What were the conditions like? My uncle wrote about it being very cold.
영하 10도 이하는 만날겠지 뭐. 그 산 꼭대기인데 마주. 도저히 이 엇가정으로 올라가지 여기. 이렇게 쌓인 게 이렇게 밟으면 엇가정 빠지고.
As I said, this is my uncle, Vince Healy. He was the eldest of 10 children. And this is my grandmother.
장남. 엄마고.
What happened was he was helping the wounded down and there was a mortar strike and he got hit in the head with a piece of mortar and died instantly.
그때 걔들은 뭐 직사폰을 쏘는데 아주 명중이 유명했어. 우리나라에 와서 고생하다 그렇게 돌아갔는데 뭐 말할 게 제일 고마운 마음이 한번 이루 말할 수 없지.
The Korean veteran and my uncle Vince never met, but they fought on the same battlefield as allies. So do you think maybe up around this area here?
예, 저기다 이제 있었고.
This is Maewha-san. So this is where the troops where Vince Healy would have been fighting, up around here. It's such a beautiful day here today, and it would have been so very different back in March in 1951 when you were here and when my uncle was here, so very different. On March 7, 1951, on Hill 410, during the Battle of Maewha Mountain, Vincent Healy was hit in the head by a mortar strike while helping a wounded soldier down the ice-covered slopes to safety. He was killed instantly. He was 24. His wounded friend survived.
Vince was in the machine gunners, which was a good platoon. He cared for his soldiers cared for him, and he was really appreciated. A real good soldier. I've met good soldiers, but I've never met one like him. His death, oh boy, that was a blow. That was a blow. So that meant someone else had to take over the gun, and of course they wouldn't have been a good firer like him, and everyone suffered. We all suffered.
The tragic news of Vince's death arrived on a quiet late summer's day in Brisbane.
The telegram arriving telling Mum of Vince's death. That day I do remember, because the doorbell rang, I went to it, because even the doorbell ringing was pretty exciting because it meant a visitor. But then this young boy gave me a red telegram. No significance to me at all that it was red, because normally they were cream. So I probably thought it was, yeah, pretty special. I didn't think that it was, that it contained something dreadful. And I took it into Mum, she was at the sewing machine, because she was either at the sewing machine or in the kitchen cooking. And I think she passed out, and I think some of the others must have removed me from the scene, because I don't remember anything that happened next. Looking back as an adult on Vince's death, it obviously had a huge effect on the family. Once again, both financially and emotionally, especially for Mum. It was a terrible, terrible time for her.
But she wanted to see where he was buried. He'd see his grave, because she got all these awful messages. You know, his face was shot to pieces. And
Mum, even though she got on with her life, she was sad. She was very sad. And her aim became to go to Korea to see Vince. That was her mission in life.
Thelma started saving for her life mission to be reunited with her lost son by working in a pineapple factory.
Mum would go early in the morning. The job that she got was on a production line peeling pineapples. Big gloves, hand peel pineapples, on your feet for the whole shift. She'd do 7, 8 hours, and then if there was overtime, she'd queue up for that as well, because she was saving to go and visit Vince. And it was all the years of grieving, longing. She had to go there.
Thelma almost lost the will to live, but she vowed that before she died, she would find Vince's grave. Thelma still had to find the cheapest way to get to Korea. Travelling mostly by boat was the only option. Thelma travelled 8,000 kilometres to Pusan, firstly by boat, then by train, and finally by plane. It took her 12 days. Thelma recorded her journey in a red travel diary and also sent many letters home to her children. Thelma's children and grandchildren waved her off at the Brisbane wharf when she departed on the first leg of her passage.
She was obviously, well, she was sort of a bit emotional. I mean, not in the sense of, I mean, she was in control, you know, she was in control of herself, but she was very much feeling this was something that she'd been waiting to do for a long time, and there was a sense of, I suppose, relief mixed with excitement, and she was, of course, in a new place she'd never been to, so there was a bit of the sort of wide-eyed, you know, innocent abroad, as you would expect. So all those things all sort of mixed up together. I think an important thing was that she was keen to know, and which was really, did we do the right thing? You know, sending troops to fight in the Korean War. And my answer then, and still is, yes.
Once Thelma had decided that she was going to go to Korea and have a spiritual reunion with Vince, there was no stopping her. She was on a mission. Yes, sure, she was a middle-aged woman who had never been more than a couple of 100 miles from her home, but she was strong, she was courageous, she was brave. She was going, come what may. How she even managed to do the basic things that we all do when we travel, like manage her luggage, manage the money, manage a foreign language, manage a foreign culture. These are all things that Thelma was doing for the first time as a middle-aged woman. How she did that, I don't know. It was extraordinary. At last, Thelma knelt beside the grave of her son Vince. She'd waited 10 long years for this spiritual reunion. Thelma writes, "When I saw the grave, I went on my knees and shed all the tears I have bottled up for years. I dug a small hole and put the soil I had with me and covered it over and poured holy water on the grave in the form of a cross. At last I have found peace. All the heartache and longing has been washed away. He is lying amidst such beauty. Its beauty will stay with me always."
When Mum came home from Korea, she was definitely a different person. She was at peace because she had achieved what she wanted to do. She still had children, and she just liked this. She was more settled and more peaceful. She was at peace, definitely at peace. My going to Korea was, as I said, a privilege and a very humbling experience. I didn't ever think I would get there, even though you'd love to have gone. But it gave you peace. It just gave you peace, and realised that his death wasn't in vain. Oh, sorry.
Louise.
Ambassador!
Hi. Chef. Very nice to meet you.
Fantastic to meet you.
Welcome to Seoul. I was here just last month for the Anzac Day ceremonies.
Oh, wow.
Quite poignant and quite sad to see the names of so many young people who obviously lost their lives during the tragedy. But then obviously we're coming to the Australians that fell during the Korean War. And obviously this monument is a dedication to all those who fell during the Korean War, and obviously we have Vince's name here.
Wow.
B.J. Healy.
It's fantastic to see his name there.
So many young soldiers who fell during the Korean War. So you can just imagine the hopes and dreams that all these young soldiers had in their youth.
Yeah, Vince was 24 when he came to Korea. But yeah, it's beautiful to see his name there with all the Australians. It's, you know, it's lovely to see Vince there, but so sad.
Yes. So sad to see so many names.
Yeah.
It's the story of Vincent Healy and his tragic death in Korea, but then the tragic search by his mother to try to find what happened to him, and the amazing story and commitment to try to get back to Pusan to find Vincent's grave. So in many respects, that personal story is such a poignant and tragic story, but also something that very much touched me personally, emotionally.
It's very sad that so many Australian young men in their prime died here fighting for the freedom of Korea. But I think that having seen how Korea has grown into such a beautiful, free, democratic economy and country, I think I can probably honestly say that while I would prefer that my uncle Vincent Healy did not die here, aged 24, that perhaps his death was not in vain, that he fought for something that was successful, something that was great. Thelma's heartbreaking story sparked the beginning of a unique and enduring friendship when it was published in a major Korean newspaper. This friendship brought together two families and two countries. I am continuing this friendship today. Very special visit today. I'm visiting the grave of Mrs. Kim Chung-kun and her husband, who are buried together. The reason I'm visiting this grave is because Mrs. Kim is the Korean war widow who befriended my grandmother and the Korean mother who looked after my uncle's grave. And I'm returning the favour today. She used to place flowers on my uncle's grave, and so today I'm returning the favour and placing some flowers on her grave. So it's very special.
Mrs. Kim saw Mum's story in the magazine in Korea. So she decided, because her husband had been killed and she had two boys, I think, so she was working at the Bank of Seoul in Seoul. So she educated those children by herself. She used to write to Mum and correspond with her for many years because, you know, she had something in common with my mother, and so they corresponded for years.
Mrs. Kim Chung-kun was moved to tears after reading Thelma's story in the Seoul newspaper. After making several inquiries, she wrote to Thelma in Australia, seeking permission to become Vince's Korean mother. Because Thelma could not visit Vince's grave again, Mrs. Kim promised her that she would. This great act of kindness was the start of a long friendship. Every year, Mrs. Kim would travel from Seoul to Pusan and place flowers on Vince's grave. Hello, Mrs. Kim. My name is Louise Evans. I am the granddaughter of Thelma Healy. Thelma Healy, who of course you befriended. I'm also friends with your granddaughter, Gracie Kim. Oh, I forgot to tell you. I don't know if I said this. Gracie says to say hello and that she thinks about you every day. Also talks about how you and my grandmother were quite similar. Very, how would you say, very strong women, very brave, very entrepreneurial, very respectful. Women ahead of your time. So this is a cake I have specially made for Gracie. She's coming today for morning tea. And this is a special cake because it's made with my grandmother's recipe. I hope Gracie likes it. It's Gracie. Well, hello. How are you? Come on in. I have a house full of people. In Korea, there is a special word called inyon, describing the fate and ties between people. It seems to depict the relationship between our two families very well. Here's to Thelma and Mrs. Kim. Oh. Mrs. Kim's youngest son immigrated to Sydney many years ago, and his daughter Gracie and I have become friends.
Okay. Oh my gosh, you are going to laugh. Now, I found a passport too.
Oh, can I see?
Yes.
Because I only recently found my grandmother's passport.
Okay. Yes.
So where has she been? She's left Korea. Here she is coming to Australia in November 2003.
To Sydney to celebrate her 80th.
Wow. And who would have thought that, like, you know, way back in, when did your grandmother first read the article in the newspaper about my grandmother? What was it, 1961? Who would have thought that back in 1961 that her reading that story and her very emotional response to my grandmother would have resulted in this?
Yes.
Would have resulted in our friendship, a book, and 3 generations going back to Korea.
Amazing.
It is amazing, isn't it?
One day, Mrs. Olin Green contacted me about a possible meetup with one of the Healys. When I did meet up with Louise, we just clicked. Well, we're like sisters, and it's very odd for me to say that because I have not really met anyone that I thought was like a sister. I think it's because we shared more than we thought we did.
We call it Han.
The desolate and war-torn Pusan Thelma visited has become a vibrant modern city with a thriving economy. The ramshackle village that housed the Korean refugees has become a beautiful landmark.
감천 문화마을이라고 불리는 곳인데요. 6.25 전쟁 때 많은 피난민들이 와서 이렇게 한 칸짜리 집을 지어서 살던 곳입니다. 그래서 그런 곳이 쭉 이렇게 사람들이 살아오면서 지금 도시 재생의 전형적인 어떤 모델로서 세계적으로 유명한 곳이기도 합니다.
Thelma would have been very sad to see the refugees who had lost everything during the war. This statue by the Yongdo Bridge represents the strength of all mothers who bravely hold together families torn apart by war. This is a beautiful statue because it really represents, I think, the suffering that women have to deal with in war, especially women like my grandmother and Mrs. Kim Kun, the women who were left behind, you know, to carry the load and to look after the children during war. Here in Busan, the Yeongdo Bridge is very important to the people of Busan and also the people of Korea, because when the refugees came flooding down from the north to escape the invading forces, families were separated. So they would come and meet under the Yeongdo Bridge to try and meet up with family who had been lost in the war. It was kind of like a meeting place. They would just go and hope that their lost family members would come as well. So it's a beautiful statue and a lovely place for it to be here at the Yeongdo Bridge. Thelma's deep love for her lost son brought her to Pusan. She could never have imagined it would now be a major international port. Busan's Gukje market holds significant history for refugees during the Korean War. It was here that they continued to carry out their day-to-day lives. Smell. Wow, that's fantastic.
이게 이제 한번 썸머 플라워 할 때.
Wow, oh, okay, okay. I like it. So it's like a green tea?
Green tea no.
No.
Korea flower tea.
Flower tea.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is veggie. Now we are having a veggies together. So what happened here? Traveling?
I'm from Australia.
I see.
And I'm a journalist and an author.
Oh.
So I wrote a book about my uncle. He was an Australian soldier and he fought in the Korean War. And he's buried here in Busan.
He buried? Sorry there. Oh.
Yeah. I'm very glad I met you.
Ah, my pleasure. I hope you visit UN's Memorial Cemetery as well. So
Yeah.
Thank you for helping. 감사합니다.
I'm on my way to a place that holds great significance for my family. The focus of my visit to Korea lies here. It is the United Nations Memorial Cemetery in Pusan, where my Uncle Vincent is buried. This cemetery is the burial place of 2,300 United Nations soldiers who died during the Korean War. I am now retracing the exact footsteps of my grandmother and my mother to my Uncle Vincent's grave. Hi, Vince. It's Louise, Geraldine's daughter. So there's good news and bad news. Only 4 of your siblings are left. So Geraldine, my mother, she's still alive. Your sister Carmel, she's going great guns. Your brother Peter, and your baby sister Monica. All still alive. Geraldine's daughter Gabriel, her children have had 2 grandchildren and there's another one on the way. So Thally's legacy is huge.
So even though you died age 24, the Healy legacy is very strong, very strong. And now I'm here following in Thelma's footsteps. And I bought you a present. Well, it's not much of a present really, but I bought you some soil from my garden. The soil here is very brown. The soil I bought is very black. But the reason I bought you some soil is because Thelma bought soil from her garden. And I want to take a little bit of you home. Take a few pebbles home for the family. It's very sad to have visited Vince's grave, but I'm also very happy to have followed in the footsteps of my grandmother and to have honoured her story and to have completed my own passage to Pusan, and also to have followed in the footsteps of my mother Geraldine and my brother Patrick. They have also been here to visit Vince's grave. Very sad moment to visit Vince's grave, but very happy to have followed in their footsteps and to have completed my own passage to Pusan.
As is my family's tradition, I will leave Vince with an Irish blessing.
So here's your blessing, Vince. May the road rise to greet you. May the wind always be at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, the rain fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. Thorogood, Richardson, Private Smith, Private Ritchie. The reason I left a flower on each of all the graves is because there's 281 Australians here, buried here, of the 340 who died in the Korean War, and there's also a lovely monument to the missing in actions. And I don't know if they've been lucky enough to have a family member come and visit, like the Healys, like the Evanses. So I just wanted to leave a little gift for each of the other men who are buried here, and to say hello from Australia.
It's significant that a boy who was born by the beach in Sandgate, Brisbane, is now buried by the beach, albeit thousands of miles away from home. I know Vince would appreciate this link back to his birthplace. The Korean War is not over. It is merely at a standstill, waiting to be resolved. This is why the road to the demilitarized zone and the border between the north and the south is under strict security. We're about to enter the demilitarized zone. We're going through a checkpoint. There's a lot of young military men swarming around, and we've just had, we've all handed over our identification and our passports, and they're getting checked, and I'm sure as soon as they decide that we're fit and able to proceed, they'll let us go. So we're just on hold at the moment. A ceasefire line splits Korea into north and south. It is a historic and tragic location. Despite the sacrifice of thousands of soldiers like my Uncle Vince, who died to keep the South free and democratic, Korea remains a divided country.
Here it is. End of separation, beginning of unification. Wow. This is where I get to see North Korea.
On a clear day, you can see far into the north. But the people of Korea, whether from the north or the south, cannot go beyond the line that separates them.
So two and two.
Yeah. In some areas it's not, because it can't be like exact. Right?
Yes.
It's about 200 to 500 meters high.
Right.
There's a small white building.
Yes.
That building is one of the North Korean guard posts.
Seriously?
Yes.
That hill right there? Wow.
And if you move to the observatory over there, you can see it with the binoculars. And you can see North Korean soldiers also.
So close?
Yeah. It's only 2.1 kilometers away from the observatory. It's the closest building located from here.
It just felt overwhelmingly sad. I mean, this aggression's been going on for more than 60 years now. My uncle came here to stem North Korean aggression, and to see it up close, it's just sad to see that it's still going on, and so unnecessary, so very unnecessary.
Due to the sacrifice of young soldiers from around the world like Vince, Korea has risen from the ashes of war. Today, South Korea is a beautiful, modern, prosperous and democratic country that maintains and respects its traditions and culture. I wish my grandmother and my Uncle Vince could see the Korea of today. They would be so proud. In South Korea, I followed the same path that my grandmother Thelma Healy walked. Over the past 2 years, I have researched the lives of Thelma and Vince. I've delved into war records, libraries, family letters and photographs, and recorded oral histories from the extended family. The result is my book, Passage to Pusan, which tells the moving story of my grandmother and her life mission to find Vince's grave. My book about Thelma, Vince, and the Healy family, and their friendship with the Kim family, was turned into a beautifully curated exhibition.
So this is the first time. Hello, Louise.
Hello. Say it again, say it again.
감사합니다.
Oh my God.
What does that mean?
Oh no, that was thank you.
Thank you. It means thank you.
Thank you, that's what I meant.
Yeah. And so this is Thelma's baby daughter, Monica.
Oh,
Yeah, she's the baby of the family.
I told you. I think you should have a drink.
Oh no, I've got soda water.
Thank you all for coming and for supporting the exhibition.
Today's exhibition shows the sacrifice and the willingness of one person to help another, and it is upon his sacrifice and the willingness that the long friendship between peoples and nations are founded.
Korea will never forget them. We will never forget the pain and sorrows of parents and wives of the Korean War veterans. Nor will we ever forget the countless number of brave warriors who dedicated themselves to the peace of the Republic of Korea.
Hi, I'm Brioni Kwan, now stop my phone. 믿음의 결실, 권서영. 허전한 마음의 한켠, 허전하기보단 찢겨진 마음의 한켠. 그이는 왜 먼저 떠나는가? 위에서 날 지켜보고 있을까? 공허한 마음의 한켠, 공허하기보단 타버린 마음의 한켠. 사랑하는 아들이여, 조금만 기다리렴. 곧 엄마도 따라갈 터이니. 아지랑이처럼 이승을 떠나는 날이 오면 천국에서 함께 손잡으리. 보이지 않는 이 믿음의 결실, 천국에서도 간직하리. Thank you.
Beautiful day, Del.
It was such a lovely day to come and visit Delhi again because we've got so much to tell her.
Yes.
So much has happened, Lou. And this is the finale of the book.
Here she is.
Yes, Delhi, what a beautiful day, Delhi, to come and see you.
The famous Thelma Healy. Shall we have a seat?
Yes, we'll have a chat to you, Delhi. We've got so much to tell you. So much has happened since you've been here. And Mum, the lovely thing, if Louise hadn't got hold of your diary, read the story and thought this is more than a diary, she has taken time out, which has meant a lot of blood, sweat and tears doing it, but the end result has been wonderful and you'd be thrilled to bits. We're very proud of Louise, like we're very proud of you and Vince and the whole family, but without Lou writing the book, it would have happened.
You're making me cry, John.
I know you're making me cry too. But I cry the whole time. Sorry.
It's a crying family. We've got the crying gene.
Well, Helen's worse.
Let's not concentrate on the bad stories.
Okay.
Today's a day to be happy, which is why we're crying.
I know. Well, you cry when you're happy and you cry when you're sad, but there's the in-between, and we're crying because we're happy.
Sure.
And sad. Happy and sad. Mixed feelings.
Yeah, bittersweet.
It is a bit like that. Mum, we went to see the exhibition a fortnight last Friday, in Sydney at the Korean Cultural Centre. It's been a great, great time. And thank you for being my mum.
Thank you for being my grandmother.
And thank you, Vince, for being my great brother. But it's all love and respect. And it's not...
We call her special.
Well, that's right, she is special.
We call her special.
And
Bye.
Thanks for everything. Thanks for Vince. Thanks for the whole family. It's been a great journey. And you've turned out some great kids. Well done. Well, the old grey mare, she ain't what she used to be, Phil.
There you go. Come on. Oh. See you, Thel.
Bye-bye.
without the groan. Ah, dear.
So, Thally and Vince are probably looking down on us, Jill.
They are, because the two little angels, or the little angel that tried to kill him, tried to die when he made his first Holy Communion, is now up there with his mum, who loves him, and they're both angels together. And I guess Maureen's up there too with you.
My Uncle Vince died fighting for peace in a land far from home. He is buried in foreign soil, but in a beautiful place where his death and his sacrifice are honoured. Thelma's passage to Pusan has ensured he will not be forgotten. He lives in our hearts and forever in our memories. Thelma and Vince now both rest in peace.